Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to a brand new episode of the TechoSpace podcast series. So, in this podcast episode, I'm very much honored and thrilled to welcome our guest, Mr. Bryce Ominski, who happens to be the CTO of DeepDive World company. And this gentleman has an experience of working with reputed MNCs like IBM and Microsoft in the past. And he's based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Now, giving a spotlight about what DeepDive World is, it is a company that is completely into the IT services and IT consulting, whose main objective is to, guide global enterprises uh, throughout the, complexities of the digital world, providing smarter solutions with a promise of a resourceable outcome and exceptional results. So, Bryce, it gives me a huge pleasure to welcome you to this podcast episode, and not to mention that Deep Dive World happens to be placed in three locations, and that one of them is in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and the other happens to be in Miami, Florida, the United States of America, and the next is in Dubai, UAE, the Middle East. So, Bryce, honestly, I mean, I'm just really looking forward for having a good conversation with you. So, Bryce, how are you doing, and how's the condition in Winnipeg right now?
Akhil, thanks for having me on your show today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Winnipeg's a bit chilly today, but I think this call will warm things up. I'm again really looking forward to that. Let's get started.
Perfect, perfect. So I believe that Winnipeg is almost having that minus temperature kind of thing where there's sheets of snow and chilly weather, like like a post-Christmas kind of feel, if I can just say.
Yeah, today is a little, we're on the warm side. It's only about minus 15 right now, Celsius.
Oh,
So we just came through a little bit of a spell where it was actually, well, with wind chill, it was a minus 35. And I have to say that's a little bit cold for me. Maybe there's some tourists that like the extreme cold weather, but I try to stay warm. So, yeah.
amazing, amazing. That's good to know. I mean, even I'm based in Melbourne, and I totally understand the things that you're trying to tell. I can relate to that because in Melbourne it's like a three layers kind of thing, and I have to go to college wearing three layers of coat. It's just the way it is. Perfect then. So, Bryce, let's kick off with the podcast episode. So, Bryce, now
Perfect.
let's go back in time. I just wanted to understand, like, what was your journey in the IT industry, and was that your childhood dream of making it big in the IT space?
Wow, what a great question. My childhood dream definitely focused around science and technology. You see, I mean, part of that was Star Trek was a huge influence on me. My hero was Lieutenant Commander Spock when I was growing up. So there's definitely like a nerd side to me, right? When I look at these things. Um, what really became clear, when I was in high school, we saw the first microchips come out and, so the first home computers. So that was really an exciting time. And, it's funny in those days, we were looking at computers that had 8K of RAM. Who would ever use that much? But of course, the coding was in machine code, and things have
Absolutely.
really changed. Out of high school, I went into university in engineering. I actually spent some time working in high voltage engineering, but also doing my master's degree, which was in artificial intelligence. And I think one of the lessons that I've really learned at that time is sometimes things aren't as they always appear. And a great example, I was working, one of my first jobs in the IT area was with Price Waterhouse in their emerging technology area. And, we were looking at this thing called artificial intelligence. How do we commercialize it? And then, many years later, people said, oh, it didn't go anywhere, but actually it did. And, one of the things that one of the stories that I really love, there was an early paper, I think it was by Gerald Sussman from MIT, talking about constraint-based analysis. And, this thing was about cells and how they could propagate ideas. It was definitely mainstream AI. It became what we see today as the spreadsheets. And so I don't think AI disappeared then. I think it went under the covers and it became part of what we do, right? And I think that's always, I think we're going to see that with even the modern large language model trends. They're going to go under the covers and do stuff. But I mean, going from there to now, these are such exciting times. And, technology now has taken the main stage. I think, at one time we even saw a difference between business and technology. And I think that difference is slowly going to disappear. I think the models that we use need to be, discussed with the business. And I think they're almost Well, they're almost inseparable, right? It's kind of like the Starship Enterprise going into combat and coming up with some last minute fix. It's just part of
Absolutely.
what you do now.
Truly, truly. So now, like you were just talking about, like 30 years back, you just heard about the term AI. So now, when I just hear about AI from different, eminent industry leaders, they just tell me that, AI, we need to have our private AI, public AI cannot be, resurfaced into the market. So when you got to know about AI during then, like what were the implications that people were talking about?
So if I understand your question, you're saying what were people talking about 30 years ago with AI?
Absolutely.
Um, it's really not a lot different than today. We were talking about using language, we were talking about expert systems, and how they could be used. And a great example is expert systems, and I think became rule-based systems, and they became very common. The language changed though when this happened. So I think people, when AI did go under the covers, people were disappointed. They were expecting, 30 years ago, we were a little bit unrealistic. We thought we'd have, soon artificial general intelligence. Still not here yet. Long way to go. There was a lot of excitement. I think one of the big things that happened then, and I remember I was actually at an AI conference in 1985, and I was, fortunate enough to meet and talk to Edward Feigenbaum, who wrote a book at that time called The Fifth Generation. And they were talking about how Japan was going to be building these new AI chips based on, logical inferences per second. There was a lot of hype that we needed to get into the race, and it just never quite materialized that way, which is really interesting because I think this is the well, Gartner sort of catches this in their hype cycle, but it's the way that technology just sort of just becomes part of what we do, right? And so you had a lot of AI centers of enablement, a lot of hype, and then it just started to happen. And now today, you have things like InRule, like Blaze, which are like rule-based engines. They're there. They're the same technology. They're just called rule-based engines, not AI. And they become mainstream. So I think that's what happens with these technologies. They become part of the mainstream over time.
That's remarkable. So I don't. I mean, the way you were just mentioning about, I feel it's like no different, and it's just the same thing. But the only thing was, there was not the right technology that people could capture and get that into reality. And there was also the fear of understanding what AI could be and what how dangerous it could be. I mean, when you look at certain things of that, but not all parts of AI can be dangerous if we use it effectively. Right.
That's a great point. I'm just going to stop on that, Akil. That's a really wonderful
Yeah.
point. I think, we still have some of the major concerns that we had then. And I think one of the top concerns for me, it's not around governance. It's not around, I mean, there's going to be always nefarious actors doing their evil deeds or whatever, but it has to do with AI failure modes. So a great example, you have an airplane that can land, it flies 1,000 flights with a pilot, and you get a storm, and the plane crashes because of the storm, perhaps, right? And everybody looks at that and they go, we can understand that the plane crashed because of the storm. Well, with AI, it's a little bit different. I might be doing, 9,999 perfect flights, but one of those is on a clear day and we don't understand all the factors that went into it, and the plane crashes. So now people don't understand it. And they call this a failure. I think with large language models now, we would maybe something like a hallucination that we may not understand the context, but it's really these failure modes I think we need to get over. And especially, some of my early work in artificial intelligence, I was actually doing work with oncology, building out cancer treatment protocols. And it's the same idea, when it fails, can you explain why it failed? And if you can't, then people get adverse to it. But here's the kicker. It's actually no worse than people. In fact, it's a lot better than human knowledge even then.
Right. That's good to know. That's good to know. So now, I mean, we had this discussion earlier. So in that discussion, Bryce, as a chief architect, you just mentioned me that Akhil, there's no one particular technology. So I just wanted to understand, like, can you just elaborate on that, to our listeners, because this is one particular thing that it's going to be like a key takeaway for our listeners. I could just say, yeah.
Yeah, what I mean by that, and the full thing might be well architected versus a technology focus. Um, I have seen a lot of organizations, focus on one technology, and it may not be the right one. And a lot of times they do this called best of breed. Let's buy the best technology that we can, the best package, and then they need to fit it in their organization and they're challenged. And what I prefer to look at is a well-architected solution that delivers business value. And I think, as architects, I mean, this is where we're going to really deliver value, is how do we show all the connections coming together. A really quick story, across two different insurance companies I worked at. One of them was a, best of breed approach, and they were able, they minimized what they had. They went with the best of breed, and it didn't work too bad, but it was a lot of work maintaining that. And what they soon found is that the interconnections and the integration started to catch up with them. In those days, it was before we had anything like, the API landscape that we have now. I think now with APIs, we can do those integrations a lot easier. Another company that I faced actually did the opposite. They didn't architect it. They just got a bunch of best of breed packages in insurance. And now and then they were even worse off. And this is fairly recent, it was in the last few years. And I mean, they're having a tough time integrating these packages together. But more important, when you buy a package, you're buying a business model. You're buying an architecture model that translates into how you do business. And I think a lot of companies don't realize that, and they don't realize that they need to change the way they do business or modify the way they do business to use certain packages. The alternative is those changes to those packages can be really expensive.
Got it. Got it. That's right. So now, this arises to a new question from my end, Bryce. So,
Yeah.
like what difference do you find between the legacy systems and the technology that we are using now? Do you find any, significant change, or is it just almost the same with a little bit of, let's say an upgradation on that?
Yeah, let me flip that around. So when we talk about legacy systems, I think it's important to say when those legacy systems were around, right? So, and I'm just going to start this off. I was at an interesting course in Stanford University, and I was at a table, and the guy sitting next to me was a COBOL compiler designer. And, this was, way back, and I almost didn't want to talk to the COBOL compiler designer. It just sounded so boring, right? But I asked him, I said,
Right.
what are the challenges? What's happening? And he pointed out, he said, we put our COBOL compiler in, and there was a small bug in it, and everybody had coded around the bug. So we fixed it. And as soon as we released the fix, it broke tons of code everywhere. And this is the thing to me about legacy. I mean, this is a great story. We need to be careful how people have used and fit systems into their whole ecosystem as we go forward. I think as we look at some of the older legacy, yeah, there's some stuff you can do. You got older systems, but there's a lot of intricacy. So if I'm talking a banking system, for instance, I'm looking at a core banking technology. There's a lot of regulatory, a lot of compliance issues. I just can't swap it in and out, right? And as we're going forward, what legacy meant 30 years ago is a lot different than what it means today. Let me explain. 30 years ago, advances were coming, every 5 years, you would change the way you think about things. Now, I think advances are coming every 6 months that change the landscape. And we're at a point where those applications that we have that we put in today, in 6 months, they're going to be legacy. And I think we need to have a modern strategy that deals with the fact that that legacy is changing very quickly. It has to deal with the fact that you're not going to change stuff out unless you really need to. And I think the third challenge is going to be, how do you integrate these legacy systems of engagement, these systems of record, with modern intelligence? And we're going to see a little bit of, I think the vendors are going to compete a little bit. You're going to see a lot of standalone intelligence. And then, as people like Satya Nadella have pointed out, you're going to see a lot of the SaaS applications also change and try to integrate that intelligence. Where is this going to go? I think you're going to see a lot more intelligence at the integration layer that supports these legacy remodeling. And I think you're going to see a lot of agentic intelligence come in to support moving with the legacy. So it's like new technology helping with old problems.
Amazing, amazing. You know, Bryce, as you were just, just clearly telling that, it just takes only 6 months. But I'll give you a live example of what exactly I face. I just purchased a brand new phone. So that phone is called OnePlus. So what happens is like, when I purchased it, I had a system update. And again, after 2 days, there was another system update. I was like, I just purchased the new phone and it's asking me a system update on again and again. I'm just feeling that, technology also is just coming with, I mean, they are coming really quick with their updation kind of thing. You were just talking about 6 months. I think it's going to be even, let's say, 1 month or even 2 months also. We don't
Yeah.
know.
No, you're bang on. We're seeing things change so quickly in that space right now. And how do you deal with legacy? Well, the reality is, I'll call it modern legacy. You're going to have to live with it. You're not going to put a core banking in system now and change it in 6 months. That's too much work. So we have to deal with it. We have to build our systems organically so that they can handle some of the changes, at least, for the next several years. But it also means that we have to keep our eye open for disruptive change. And and I'm not talking like, marginal continuous improvement, but companies are really going to need to be aware of when there are significant changes that are disruptive and what that means to their architecture and their systems.
Perfect, perfect. That's completely understandable, Bryce. So, Bryce, now let's say, as a CTO of DeepDive World, I just
Mhm.
wanted to understand this. Like, how are you able to, oversee the strategy with the clients and, different IT projects? Like, what goes on with that?
Well, that's a great question. And there's really a couple of parts to that answer. I think the first part is working with our clients directly and helping them understand digital transformation. We've done a lot of work where we'll really come in at the point where the senior executive team, the C-suite, has delivered a business plan and a strategy. They've looked at 5 years. They've already made some initial decisions about where their clients are, where their customers are, and how they're going to win with those customers. So we'll usually come in at that point to help them build out a roadmap from strategy to execution. And I think it's important that these companies that are on this roadmap really take a walk before you run approach. Like before you start investing in huge systems of intelligence, maybe you need your data to be in place. Maybe you need to have it accessible. Maybe it needs to be clean as a first step, for instance. And then you get that ready. Everybody wants to do something with intelligence. What we're really seeing in the industry right now, I think, is a lot of companies that are doing sandbox intelligence, but they haven't moved it into the mainstream because their systems aren't ready. And that's one of the areas where we can really help out. We do a lot of work, for instance, with mergers, supporting that, mergers and acquisitions in the finance area, supporting credit unions and banks. How do you merge them? We've introduced some technologies like domain coexistence, where you can actually have multiple domains and share. And now that brings me to DeepDive World. Where do we fit in? And we've really taken an approach. It's really, we've come at it from a blue ocean perspective. What do we do different? We really have a different consulting model with our clients. We work with them. We view them more as partners than clients. And most important, we're able to help them with our own technology, support them. And domain coexistence is one area that we've done a lot of work. Some of the other areas, we have a very strong security presence, very important today. A lot of people are being hit if they don't have a lot of security, which ironically, if people just maybe adopted multi-factor authentication, could really help. DeepDive World is an amazing company with our presence in the United Arab Emirates and the MENA region. Um, there's a lot of stuff happening there, and the companies just want to move forward. And it's really working again with our team to go, how do we do that? And how do we translate some of these technologies to what they're doing right away so that we can help?
That's terrific and remarkable to know. So does your company Deep Dive have any plans to, expand their business towards India or let's say to the APAC region? Is that anything in the pipeline going on?
Wow, that's a great question. We do have expansions. At the moment, I can't really say too much about that.
Right.
We've recently, so, Deep Dive World has been an amazing company since I joined them. Um, I first worked with them back just before COVID, or around COVID, actually, around 2020, I believe. And, we started off, we were called iRangers and Deep Dive Group. We've had several, mergers and consolidations, and we've grown. And, we've worked with people like Shared Health Manitoba. We've worked with, the airport authorities. We've done work with them. It's just amazing. And our whole approach has been to offer a set of services with really, really top-notch people, giving them a chance to be challenged also. So now, do we go to India or China? Um, I can't really say at this point. I can say though that we're going to be spreading out. We do have plans. Yes.
Perfect, perfect. As I can just say, Deep Dive World has one motto. I just was mentioning the objective, but I feel that, now the right thing that can be put forward for Deep Dive World is sky is the limit. That's clearly what I can just, see.
And I'm just going to add here. It's the team that I work with when I talk with Ahmed, our MIDI CEO, and Misha, who does a lot of work in Canada and chairing the organization, moving it forward. Our North American CEO, Dima Sodik, great guys to work with. And the vision has always been to provide really cutting edge services that work. And so we find ourselves doing a lot of things in a merger, like, connecting environments with no downtime in special cases and things like that. And so they've always, their model has always been around how do we challenge our team to do work? There is nothing more exciting, Akhil, than getting up with a team that wants to get things done. And really great team to work with.
Perfect, perfect. That's amazing to know. Now, this is one thing, Bryce, which I personally wanted to ask, and I'm very, very curious to know this. Like, I just wanted to understand, like, Bryce, how did you and your team, I mean, your company, the Deep Dive World, come up with a transformative strategy for the Winnipeg International Airport in Canada? Like, what were the things that, went across with that?
Winnipeg International Airport has a lot of passengers. They're really on the cutting edge. So, I started talking with them. Um, well, it was actually during COVID again, right? So there was a downturn in the passengers, but they knew that wasn't going to last forever. And we started having discussions with the director of IT. What happens when people come back? What do we do? And there's a few things we did. Again, we started with their business plan and their strategy. What can we do? And they had this concept. It was, from couch to cabin, with the idea that if I'm sitting at home, how do I take the customer experience and transform it? So this is a great place to start. And then we looked at some of the things that were happening around the world. If you look at places like Dubai Airport, what's happening there? We looked at some of the current reports, and we started to line that up with where they wanted to go. And we started coming up with the idea of a customer experience that wasn't limited to on premises in the airport. It started to look at things like if I'm at a hotel and I'm going into the airport, how can I make that friendlier? If I'm on a long layover at the airport, what can I do to make the customer experience better? And how does that, if I'm going to improve the customer experience, how does that relate into marketable activities? And from there we started to build out a longer term plan that it's already being adopted to some extent. So again, Winnipeg International Airport, great people to work with, and going forward, I think they're going to be doing a lot of great stuff.
That's superb. That's good to know. And I mean, personally, I would love to visit the Winnipeg International Airport someday in my life if I ever come to Canada. Because the way you were just talking about it, I want to look at myself and I mean, have that experience on hand. So that's what
Akil,
I
if you
will.
come in the winter, I will have a parka waiting for you to keep you warm and a nice toque. So you're welcome in Winnipeg anytime.
Surely, surely, Bryce. Really looking forward for that, and I just feel that it happens as soon as possible. Let's see. Perfect, perfect. So now, Bryce, like, I just wanted to know, like, let's go into the point of an experience kind of a thing. Now, Bryce, like, tell me honestly, like, what's your experience been like, when you're, managing and juggling like multiple, large scale and complex IT projects, and are there any success stories which you would like to share with our listeners in your tenure that you have experienced?
Well, success stories. Yeah, there's a few, right? I can talk to one of the, I think one of the main ones. We had to move a data center from Edmonton to Calgary this is when I was at IBM, and the price tag was very high. I won't mention the exact amount, and it was too much. And we came into it, and the team had this idea, which isn't a bad idea. We're just going to stand up the new data center in Calgary and do the work. And the problem was the budget to send up a completely new data center and not reuse any of the equipment was fairly high. So we needed to approach that. And I think that the key was really dealing with people collaboratively. It wasn't, I mean, that there's so many people in the room that, no one person gets a handle on the technology. You really do need everybody to comment on it. So we really did a few things when we went into this. The first thing we did is we got people in a room, and I remember some of those discussions in Edmonton. It was getting people to think differently was the first part. It was, okay, we're in a brainstorm with no limits, and then really encouraging people that you really meant to brainstorm with no limits, and then taking some of their ideas, coalescing that. And we came up with an approach where we would move pieces of hardware at a time. We ended up at that time also having the longest point-to-point replication, facility, which was really cool. So that was the first thing. The second thing was actually in the execution. There's so many details in planning out a project like that you actually can't track all the details that well. We had 5 project managers working for me on that, great architecture team, right? And it was at the end of the day, making sure people were accountable for what they were doing. So if somebody was working in the network area, we would give them a broader task, but we would make it their responsibility to track the detailed stuff they were doing. So I still insisted on plans, but really empowered people to work. And third, when they brought forth a problem, to come forward with a solution to make sure that we had something. So, we had a really good team on that one. Everything happened. And, and then there was like this one event that occurred. And the other thing we did, I guess the fourth point, is we did research on previous projects. And we found that they all suffered from a common problem, in that as you get close to the cutover and going live, something would always go wrong. And guess what? With our project, something went wrong. And we had to do this over a weekend. We had limited time, because if you go over a certain time, you can't back out of it. And we were looking at this, and I was talking with the project executives, and I remember it was like, I think 3 a.m. on a Saturday or something, some crazy hour. And I'm talking with these
Whoa.
executives, and they were asking, should we go ahead? And the answer was, yeah, I think we're in good shape. We did good work. And at that time, there was some suggestions. Let's recheck our wiring. Let's redo this, redo that. But we really stuck to our guns, and we had confidence in what we did. We made sure we had everything was in place ahead of time and double checked, so we didn't have to redo it. Turned out the problem, we were getting network collisions, in the Edmonton area, and it turns out we had just failed to turn off the old network, and that was causing some crazy. It was really a what I would call a silly little problem, but the team had the courage. They believed in themselves, and I think that's the other thing with the team, is to really support people, to make sure that they do their things and they believe in themselves. And I think as a executive on a project like that, it's important that we build people up and let them use their own judgment to come forward. So project went fine. We trusted the team, was delivered, and yeah, it was a very successful project.
That's terrific. I mean, as they say, right, that a project becomes successful based on the team. And I can just say that your team was completely, I mean, terrific. And they had a good, expertise, and they all trusted. The main thing, that more than trusting the team, they trusted themselves, and then the trust with the team started. So
Yes.
that's how, that's how united a team becomes. And
Well,
that's
well,
really
you're right
remarkable.
on, Akil, and it really starts even with conversations, listening
Yeah.
to ideas. So even if you're not in a formal brainstorming, am I listening to those ideas before we make decisions? And if you do, man, there's a lot of good ideas in it. When you get 150 people coming up with ideas, you got a lot of really good ideas coming on the table, like way more
Yeah.
than I could think of, right? So
Yeah, I mean, now, I mean, you just gave me I mean, a solid question. I mean, you were just saying 150 people are, brainstorming with ideas. So when 150 people come with different ideas, do you, just, note it down or draft it in a chick paper, and, just select, okay, the best of best has to be this. Okay, he has given the best idea. So how does that go about?
I, sorry, what exactly are you asking, Akil? Is it about the project or about the people? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Basically, like when people are working in a project and people have like multiple ideas, let's say 150 people are there in the project and they have 150 brilliant ideas. So in
Yep.
that case, like how do you select the best of best ideas? Do you, put that in a chit? Okay, okay,
Oh,
this person is, brought the best idea. So how does that go about?
there's two parts to that. If you're at a part where you have enough runway, it's really important to listen to the idea. So a lot of times you're going to get a lot of great ideas about how to do something. And listening isn't just, oh, I'm going to listen. It's bringing the right people that can evaluate the idea to the table and having the right group talk about it. And I think there's a point where you have some ideas that are very open, but it also, as you start to go down the tunnel towards delivery, I think there's less of a tolerance towards, completely new ideas. Like once okay, this is the approach we're doing. I don't want a different approach at this point, right? And
Yeah,
you got to keep the team with you so that everybody's working in lockstep on what the objective is for the phase that you're working in. And at the end of the day, what you really want is people to go home that had an exciting project and to be very excited by it and to know that they've done something that changed the world in some way.
absolutely, absolutely. That's completely understandable and relatable because I was part of multiple hackathons, during my tenure with my former company. So in the winter time, we were doing a hackathon where everyone, first when we started with the hackathon, it was just like a basic idea, just understanding what can we do, what can we, come up with. And then after that, started refining and started churning up. I was like, okay, wow, what we made this. It's just an achievement. So on those
Akil, and
lines,
you
I
bring up
relate.
a great point. A lot of times with good ideas, you only know if you have a good idea when you've coded it, right? So
Yeah,
you need to do this along the way. You need to run tests. They talk about failing fast, but that's really what an organization has to be prepared to do. I had one colleague that was Jim Wilt. He was chief architect at Best Buy, and they were looking at two different approaches in microservices. Which one do we do? And his approach, and I'll never forget this, was let's do both of them. Let's figure out which one works. Let's put the time in and let's do both, POCs. Let's get it done. Let's know what we're doing and let's go forward, eyes wide open. And so I think one of the things that's really underrated but essential is having a team that can go from business right down to the code level and understand what the implications are. Great point you brought up there with the hackathon. We need more
yeah,
hackathons. Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. The hackathon, brings the best of people in the project, and that actually shows them, okay, like wow, they are good in this one, and from the core level, you can understand, okay, their expertise lies here. So, and for the record, yeah, yes, Bryce.
Absolutely. And in a real situation too, I think what's really important when whatever governance style like a project wants to adopt, whether it's waterfall, whether it's agile, when you're going through it, you really want to make sure you empower the people to make the decisions that they're good at making. And that means like giving your development team some autonomy to make decisions, right? You don't want your executive team, you know, doing everything. They should pass off the things that aren't important, but make sure that you have, wait a minute, there's those things are important. Okay, let's talk about them, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's right. Now, Bryce, this is something, which is completely personal and completely like, you would just be in awe when you talk about it. Not exactly awe, but you'll be really proud, when you'll talk about it. So Bryce, I just wanted to understand, like, what were the milestones that you have achieved when you were certified as the IT architecture leader? Like, was this, I mean, can you just, relate to me this feeling? Like, do you feel that, when you just were certified with this accolade, was it like winning a gold medal in a Olympic Olympic thing? Was it like that?
Well, yeah, it kind of was. So, my certification is as a distinguished architect to be able to. Well, the one that I'm most proud of is my ISA Global Distinguished Architect certification. And, I started the architecture route way back, when I was back at IBM. I started to, do project management and, architecture and move into the architecture space. We did solution architecture with Air Canada. And I think, one of my experiences at Air Canada, it was during 9/11, and we had to do a project with Air Canada Vacations. So the Twin Towers were hit, and the budget was sort of frozen. to a very limited budget. We had these servers that we had to, just refresh. Doesn't sound like a big deal. It was, one was active, one was passive, standard backup configurations. And guess what started to happen? All of a sudden, the vacation packages came on sale, and people didn't care about the Twin Towers anymore. It was off to Mexico and off to Cuba, and the systems were starting to get overloaded. So the request was, what can we do to make these systems work better in this crisis? And that was really, I think that was my first experience to really wanting to get certified and seeing what I could do as an architect to help people. And in that case, very simple solution. We made it an active configuration. It could handle, a lot more transactions, but that started me on the journey. And the first thing I looked at was, with IBM was Zachman, of course, moving forward, a lot of open group input. And then when I moved in my career to Microsoft, I started working with ISA Global, and we started taking the core training. And what I found is there was quite a difference in the training, in that it wasn't framework based. Like if you look at Zachman or TOGAF, a lot of very framework type stuff. ISA Global offered a very different training approach where they came in and they helped build competencies. And hey, there's a few areas I needed to work on. And I got, worked with a mentor that helped me get through that, right? And I think the experience with having a really seasoned mentor to help me really started to guide me through the process. So when I was at Microsoft, when I got my seat of professional, my mentor was Jim Wilt. I mentioned him. He was at Best Buy, and really opened my eyes up to what good architecture could be, right? And then doing a lot more work at, to the distinguished level, which really is a certification that says, yeah, you can handle the biggest projects and lead them technically. Um, and at the end of the day, the thing is, you know what you can do. And I've been in situations now that you've got the certification where somebody says, oh, that's craziness. What are you talking about? And it gives you enough to step back and go, okay, wait a minute, what's really happening? I know what to do, right? And I think, and so at the end of the day, I think early on in my career, there was a little bit of this, to be really open, with you, Akhil, there was this a little bit of you do a job, follow the methodology, but did I really do it right? I think,
Yeah,
and now, because you've talked to peers, you've gone through it, you've been assessed. When you do something, you know whether it's right or wrong. I mean, and recently, I was doing some work with business architecture, and what I've learned from this is that, I guess being a really good technology leader means talking to other people in the field and figure out what's happened. And we had one issue with, on the business architecture side, and I reached out to some of the, really the foremost experts. What can we do? What would you do? And take the time to have that space to listen. So I think that's the most important thing I got out of the certification, was meeting people, the right people to talk to. I'm very active now, of course, in the Chief Architect Forum, which is a great opportunity, for people to meet other chief architects now, right? And
yep.
again, I find that being able to go with somebody, on a call, in a working group, and go, well, what are you doing? And finding out maybe I'm not alone with those problems. And the odd time you are the only one with that problem, it's probably because they have a solution, and that makes life a lot easier. So it's been a great journey, met great people, and at the end of the day, it's just really exciting to have those discussions with people about how to do it right.
That's truly. As my mom just tells me that, when you meet multiple people across different domains, you learn a lot, and that's an eye opener for you. And in your case also, that's completely understandable and truly relatable to me. Yeah. So Bryce, before we conclude our podcast session, so Bryce, I just wanted to understand, like, can you just give me an insight with respect to your expertise, on the likes of intelligence systems, information systems, and, international business finance and innovation? Like, what exactly would you like to, put across?
Wow, that's pretty wide open, Akil. When we're doing things, it's really important to talk to people that know what's happening. Even today, there's little curves that happen, um, and you want to be aware of it. You don't want to work in a vacuum. And I often wonder, as I went through my career, what did it mean to go through different levels? And I think one of the most important things is the way we're able to talk about stuff, but know stuff and have a network so that we can make really impactful outcomes at the same time know where we're going. One of the experiences I had early in my career that I'll share before we go, we talked about this. I was actually doing some work, Price Waterhouse Emerging Technology. I'm on the airplane, and the gentleman sitting next to me was an engineer on the Apollo space program.
Wow.
And also, he was now currently working at Area 51. And I had to ask the question, the big question, I'm a little bit the nerd in me. And I asked him, I said, you know what? Are you guys really reverse engineering these UFOs? And the answer was a lot more profound than I expected. He turned around, and at the time I was on this airplane, and I had this personal computer. It was called an Osborne. We called it the Osborne Luggable. It weighed about half a ton. You'd put it on your back. I had it in the airplane, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, that computer you're using. Could you have imagined you would have been carrying a computer like that 10 years ago?"
Whoa,
And I'm
whoa.
like, "No." Like it was only about, this big. And at the time, it was like one of the most part. It was, coming out of the mainframe era. I'm walking on the plane with this computer. He says, "Could you have imagined 10 years ago you'd be doing that?" No, I couldn't. And he said, "Imagine technology now, if you take place like, say, Area 51, just imagine that they're 10 years ahead in the technology, what that means."
Wow.
And the
I
answer
mean,
is you can't, right? And that, to me, that's one of the things that inspired my career. And it made me realize that you really need to get into like, maybe not the real Area 51, but I realized I had to get into the other companies that had their own little Area 51 activity happening and share that. And since then, I don't regret reaching out, having an amazing set of contacts. Working with ISA Global, I really encourage people to, join some of the seminars we have. Go to the podcasts like yours, great podcast, Nikhil. I've seen a few. Hopefully they'll watch this one and enjoy it. Also, if I may, I do a CAF news segment and have a few shows. Check them out. We're trying to talk to the leading experts, and sometimes those discussions give you an insight. Well, even 2 years out now is a long time. So I would say get involved in the community and go forward, is one of the best things that we can do career-wise.
truly, truly. And when you were just talking about that, those engineers who were saying that, okay, 10 years back, did you ever imagine that you will have this kind of a technology? I was not, I mean, you have experienced that particular, instance. But, when you were just telling me that thing, I was like blown. I'm like, what kind of, insight could that have been? I was not even there then, but hearing it from you, I'm like, wow. I mean, how did that come about? And that's truly, truly remarkable indeed. Yeah.
I'm really happy the answer wasn't about little green men, right? I don't have to worry about that. But
Yeah,
it actually shook me up more than I thought, because now it means that there's so much happening with technology that we don't know about. And what can we do to find out? And yeah, we're at an exciting time for sure, Akil.
absolutely, absolutely. As I can just say that, the sky is open, and there's a lot of upgradation going on into the technological world, and you can expect surprises and ups and downs, and you can experience a lot of magnificent things that will just come over. So we have to just be ready for what is coming. You just we have to just fasten our seatbelts for that.
Absolutely. Akil, thank you very much. I really enjoyed our discussion today. I hope we can talk again. This was really cool.
Absolutely, absolutely, Bryce. Indeed, I would just say, Bryce, thank you so much for, giving me the opportunity to have a collaboration with you and, have a conversation with you. You just made my day, as I can just say, just made
Awesome.
my day, seriously. And,
Thanks,
you
Akil.
know, every insight that you were talking about, the success stories, like when you met multiple people, I just was having that wow factor. I'm like, wow, I mean, Bryce has experienced the best people. He just came across all the amazing people, and that just made what Bryce is now. into that amazing, eminent industry leader. So thank you so much, Bryce, for taking time and being part of this podcast initiative of mine. So, listeners, before we conclude our podcast episode, this is an open request to all the industry leaders out there who are hearing to my podcast. If you have any key interesting insight or any interesting journey which you would like to share through my podcast episode, you could reach out to me on my email ID, akhil.navluri55@gmail.com, or you could WhatsApp me on my number, which is present on my podcast page. Or there's a new option which you could, just come across now. You could just DM me directly on my Instagram page, the TechOSpace Podcast, and any interesting, useful insight I would get to you as soon as possible. And who knows, it's going to be you next time who I'm going to be doing a podcast with. I mean, the industry leaders. So this is your host, Akhil Lavluri, signing off. We would be back with another podcast episode very soon with another industry leader. So till then, take care. Goodbye. Stay tuned. Thank you. Au revoir. Goodbye and namaste.
Namaste.